They sealed their church for 51 years. When it was finally opened, only 2 people were still inside. Have you ever come across a story that seems too strange to be true, yet there's just enough detail to make you question everything? A few months ago, while I was researching forgotten stories from small American towns, I found repeated references to a place called Blackbriar. A tiny community that no longer appears on most modern maps. At first I assumed it was another local legend, but the more I looked, the more interesting it became. Several archived newspaper clippings, county records, and interviews all mention the same unusual event that supposedly took place in the spring of 1986. According to those reports, county officials forced open an abandoned church that had been sealed for more than 50 years. Inside they found 2 elderly caretakers. Both were alive. Both claimed they had never left, and both insisted they hadn't been hiding from the outside world. According to one deputy who later spoke anonymously, the older man looked directly at everyone in the room and said, "We weren't keeping people out. We were making sure no one came in." That single sentence was enough to send me down a rabbit hole. Now, I can't verify every part of this story, and some details contradict each other depending on which source you read. So, as always, I'll leave it up to you to decide what you believe. According to county records, the church was officially closed in the winter of 1935 after a severe storm damaged part of the building. Most residents moved away over the following years. Eventually, the town itself faded into history. What made investigators return decades later wasn't a ghost sighting or an anonymous phone call. It was a land survey. A survey crew noticed that one property inside the abandoned town still had an active electrical connection. Not much power, just enough to keep drawing a small amount of electricity every month. That discovery led officials to investigate. When they arrived, they immediately noticed something unusual. Every entrance had been reinforced from the inside. Heavy wooden beams blocked the doors. The stained glass windows had been covered with thick planks. Even the basement entrance had been sealed with stone. According to one investigator, it looked less like someone was trying to protect themselves, and more like someone was trying to protect whatever was inside. After several attempts to call out received no response, the county authorized a forced entry. When the workers finally removed the last beam and pushed open the front door, they expected to find decades of dust and decay. Instead, they found lanterns burning. The pews had been cleaned. Fresh water sat on a nearby table, and near the altar sat 2 elderly people. An older man named Samuel Mercer, and his younger sister Ruth. According to the deputy's report, neither of them appeared surprised. Samuel reportedly stood up, nodded politely and said, "It finally happened." The deputy asked him what he meant. Samuel simply replied, "The doors are open now." According to everyone present, Ruth immediately became nervous after hearing those words. She reportedly interrupted her brother and said, "We still have time." Naturally, the investigators had dozens of questions. Where had they been getting food? Why hadn't they contacted anyone? Why had they sealed every entrance? Samuel answered most of those questions calmly. According to his statement, local families had quietly supplied food during the first few years after the church closed. Eventually, those families either moved away or passed on. After that, Samuel and Ruth survived by growing vegetables behind the church and collecting rainwater. Investigators later confirmed there had once been a small hidden garden behind the building. That part at least appeared to be true. When asked why they stayed for 51 years, Samuel reportedly gave the same answer every time. It wasn't safe to leave. The deputy asked, "Safe from what?" Samuel looked toward the old bell tower before answering. The silence. According to the official interview notes, nobody understood what he meant. The investigators assumed age had affected his memory. But then they noticed something odd. Throughout every interview, Samuel kept checking the church clock. The strange part? The clock had stopped decades earlier. Its hands hadn't moved since 1935. Yet, every few minutes, Samuel looked up at it as though he expected it to begin ticking again. Eventually, one investigator asked why he kept staring at a broken clock. Samuel reportedly smiled. It only works when it's almost time. According to later interviews, that answer made several people uncomfortable. But the investigators continued searching the building. They found journals, boxes of handwritten notes, maps of the surrounding forest, pages filled with dates. The dates stretched back almost 2 centuries. Each page listed disappearances, unusual weather events, missing travelers, and unexplained accidents. The same phrase appeared repeatedly beside many of the entries. The bell must never ring. Nobody knew what that meant. When asked about it, Ruth became visibly upset. According to one witness, she quietly told the investigators, "Our father wrote those. He believed the bell called attention." The deputy reportedly asked, "Attention from who?" Neither sibling answered. Instead, Samuel changed the subject. Later that afternoon, investigators climbed into the church's bell tower. To their surprise, the bell itself was still there. Old, rust-covered, completely silent. One worker suggested lowering it for preservation. Another joked about ringing it before removing it. According to multiple accounts, Samuel immediately shouted, "Don't touch it." Witnesses later said it was the first time he'd shown any emotion all day. The workers laughed, assuming he was simply attached to the old church. One of them grabbed the rope. He gave it a gentle pull. Nothing happened. The bell didn't move. The rope simply slipped from his hands. Everyone shrugged and continued working. According to one surveyor, that's when things slowly began changing. The birds disappeared. Wind that had been blowing all morning suddenly stopped. Even the insects seemed to vanish. One deputy later wrote that the silence around the church felt unnatural, not peaceful, empty, almost as though every sound nearby had been swallowed. That evening, investigators packed their equipment and prepared to leave. Samuel reportedly asked one final question before they drove away. "Did anyone ring the bell?" The deputy answered no. Samuel nodded. Then he quietly replied, "Good." The investigation officially ended 2 days later. The church was scheduled for demolition. Samuel and Ruth were moved to a nearby care facility. For a while, that seemed to be the end of the story. Then something unexpected happened. According to local newspaper archives, 3 hikers disappeared within 6 months inside the forest surrounding Blackbriar. Search teams never found them. The following year, 2 hunters reported hearing church bells deep in the woods, despite the church having already been demolished. Authorities searched the area. Nothing was found. Over the next decade, similar reports continued. Campers claimed they occasionally heard a single church bell just after sunset. Some described hearing faint singing where no buildings remained. Others insisted they saw lights moving between trees before disappearing without a trace. Of course, none of those stories were ever officially confirmed. And that's where fact begins, blending with folklore. As for Samuel and Ruth, records show they both passed away within a year of leaving the church. One nurse later claimed Samuel repeated the same sentence during his final days. According to her interview, he kept saying, "I hope they never ring it." Nobody knew what he meant. Or maybe they simply chose not to ask. Now, after reading everything I could find, I think there are only 2 reasonable explanations. The first is that Samuel and Ruth spent decades isolated from the outside world, creating a belief that became stronger with every passing year. It's something we've seen happen before. Isolation changes people. Stories become traditions. Traditions become absolute truths. The second possibility is the one that's much harder to explain. What if they really were waiting for something? Not because they expected to survive forever, but because they believed someone had to remain until the very end. Whether you believe any of this is entirely up to you. Personally, I'm not convinced every detail is true. Some parts are almost certainly exaggerated over time, but I do find it interesting that several completely unrelated accounts repeat the same warning. Don't ring the bell. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe every small town has one story that people refuse to forget for a reason. Either way, if I ever find myself exploring an abandoned church in the middle of nowhere and I come across an old bell that's been hanging untouched for decades, I think I'll leave it exactly where it is. But that's just me. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoy mysteries like this, don't forget to subscribe for more.